Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, nuclear talks aimed at reviving the 2015 agreement with Iran is scheduled to resume tomorrow in Vienna. In what Western diplomats say may well be the last phase of efforts to revive the JCPOA. U.S. President Joe Biden speaks with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett after the latter proclaimed Jerusalem's determination to prevent Tehran's nuclear aspirations, regardless of any international agreement. Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog speaks with his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan to wish him a speedy recovery after testing positive for the coronavirus. The United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, alongside France, Britain, Germany, China, and Russia, are scheduled to resume negotiations in Vienna tomorrow in what Western diplomats have stressed to TV7 may well be the last phase of efforts to revive the JCPOA, which is the abbreviation of the technical term for the so-called 2015 nuclear agreement. Consequently, in a move seen as a last push to entice the Ayatollah regime into recompliance with the deal, the Biden administration has restored sanctions waivers allowing Russian, Chinese, and European companies to carry out non-proliferation work for Iran's civilian nuclear installations. Accordingly, the U.S. State Department has sent a report signed by Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Congress explaining, quote, "The waiver with respect to these activities is designed to facilitate discussions that would help to close a deal on a mutual return to full implementation of the JCPOA and lay the groundwork for Iran's return to performance of its JCPOA commitments." The report further stressed, quote, "It is also designed to serve U.S. non-proliferation and nuclear safety interests and constrain Iran's nuclear activities. It is being issued as a matter of policy discretion with these objectives in mind and not pursuant to a commitment or as part of a quid pro quo, Latin for a reciprocal favor." It is important to highlight, however, that Washington sought to distinguish between restoration of sanctions waivers for Tehran's civilian nuclear program and sanctions relief. In a statement on his Twitter account, State Department spokesman Ned Price stressed, quote, "We will not provide sanctions relief for Iran and will not until or unless Tehran returns to its commitments under the JCPOA." He went on to justify the move by stressing that similar to the Trump administration, the current U.S. government granted its international partners permission to address growing nuclear non-proliferation and safety risks in Iran. A senior European official involved in the talks in Vienna, who spoke to TV7 on condition of anonymity, said that the American move was a minor show of goodwill directed at Beijing and Moscow rather than Tehran, without giving any additional details. Separately, the Ayatollah regime was seemingly unimpressed by the American move. Iran's national security advisor Ali Shamkhani released a statement on his Twitter account proclaiming Iran's legal right to continue research and development and to maintain its peaceful nuclear capabilities and achievements, along with its security against supported evils, which according to Shamkhani, who effectively serves as the chief security advisor to the Islamic Republic Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, cannot be restricted by any agreement. He further stressed in a message later echoed by Iran's foreign ministry that real effective and verifiable economic benefits for Iran is a necessary condition for the formation of an agreement, and a show of lifting sanctions is not considered constructive since an agreement in which the sanctions that form the maximum pressure are not lifted will condition the country's economy and cannot be the basis of a good deal. Meanwhile, in an interview to MSNBC's The Choice with Ayman Mohyeldin, U.S. Special Envoy for Iran Rob Malley, who has the U.S. delegation in Vienna, explained that the two primary Iranian demands are simply unattainable.
They want us to lift all of the sanctions that President Trump imposed, and we say some of them he imposed because of Iran's behavior that has nothing to do with the nuclear deal, and so those we intend to maintain, even though a majority we would lift. We can't make a promise that we can't hold, and President Biden will not make it. I won't make it. We're not going to tell Iran that once we get into the deal, no president can tear it up. Future president could do that. We don't intend to if Iran is consistent in compliance with its obligations.
The U.S. Special Envoy for Iran also stressed in response to a question on whether the U.S. and Israel are engaged in joint exercises to prepare for a possible war with Iran that while in disagreement, Washington and Jerusalem are working very closely together, all the while reiterating that President Biden remains convinced of the importance of the 2015 nuclear agreement.
We work very closely with the Israeli government. We're very transparent with what we're doing. We do have a disagreement on this issue, but our belief is not that words are going to stop Iran's nuclear program, is that the JCPOA, the deal, the agreement that we reached, proved that it stopped it, and it could stop it again. President Biden still wants us to negotiate in Vienna. We're going back next week. That's a signal or a sign of our continued belief that it is not a dead corpse, that we need to revive it because it is in our interest.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden called Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett yesterday evening, during which the latter congratulated the former on the operation to eliminate ISIS leader Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurashi, also known as Hajj Abdullah. Bennett proclaimed that the world is now a safer place thanks to the courageous operation of the U.S. forces. Furthermore, according to a statement communicated by the Prime Minister's media advisor, the two leaders also discussed regional challenges, especially the growing Iranian aggression and the attempts to block the Iranian nuclear program, among other issues of joint interest. And while the phone conversation was cited as cordial, it is important to highlight that Jerusalem is preparing for the worst ahead of tomorrow's resumption of talks in Vienna. In opening remarks to his weekly cabinet meeting yesterday morning, Premier Bennett stressed that whoever thinks that this agreement will bolster stability is mistaken.
ראשית הצירים של האיומים על מדינת ישראל היא איראן. אנחנו כממשלה נושאים באחריות להתמודד עם הגרעין האיראני, וכמובן עוקבים מקרוב אחר המתרחש בשיחות וינה. העמדה שלנו ידועה וברורה. הסכם בתנאים המסתמנים יזיק להתמודדות עם תוכנית הגרעין. מי שחושב שהסכם כזה יגביר את היציבות הוא טועה. למה? כי הוא יעכב בסך הכל זמנית את תחום ההשארה, תחום אחד מסוים, אבל כולנו באזור נשלם על כך מחיר כבד חסר פרופורציה. בשבועות האחרונים, דווקא בזמן המשא ומתן, איראן מגבירה את האגרסיביות שלה ומפעילה טרור שוב ושוב באזור, כפי שכולם ראו. ככה מנהלים משא ומתן בנוסח טהרן.
The Prime Minister further emphasized Israel's efforts to prepare for the worst, all the while reiterating Israel's resolve to thwart Iran's nuclear aspirations in a message aimed at dissuading international companies from investing in a post-sanctions Islamic Republic.
בימים אלה אנחנו סוגרים פערים ובונים את עוצמתה הצבאית של ישראל לשנים ואפילו עשורים קדימה. ישראל תשמור על חופש פעולה בכל מקרה, עם או בלי הסכם. כל משקיע בר דעת, ואני אומר את זה לחברות בינלאומיות, כל משקיע בר דעת מבין שההשקעה היום במשטר האיראני, בכלכלה האיראנית, זאת לא השקעה נבונה. לא לטווח ארוך ואפילו לא לטווח הבינוני.
In other news, Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog called his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan yesterday evening to wish him good health and a speedy recovery after contracting the coronavirus. Per a statement by the president's residence in Jerusalem, President Erdogan thanked his Israeli counterpart for his concern about his well-being and seized the opportunity to discuss the possibility of meeting soon. It is worth noting that prior to contracting the coronavirus, the Turkish leader visited Ukraine, during which he announced that his Israeli counterpart, Herzog, would make an official state visit to Turkey in mid-March.
Mart ayının ortalarında inşallah bu ziyaret gerçekleşecek. Ve bu ziyaretle beraber tabii ikili ilişkilerimizi geleceğe yönelik çok daha farklı bir zemine, olumlu istikamette oturtmanın gayreti içerisinde olacağız ve bizim bu yaklaşımımız aynı şekilde İsrail tarafında da mevcuttur.
While President Erdogan has made repeated overtures to seek normalization with the state of Israel, these efforts do not sit well with many of his Islamist supporters. Last week, in front of the Israeli consulate in Istanbul, hundreds of Turkish demonstrators gathered to protest against normalizing Ankara's relations with Jerusalem.
Öncelikle İsrail devleti bir terör devletidir. Kesinlikle Müslüman ülkelerin bunu davet edilmesini, altı çiziyorum, davet etmesi çok kötü bir şey, çok yanlış bir şey. Müslümanlar ve Filistin davasına vurulmuş büyük bir darbedir. Ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Devleti'nin de bunu davet etmesini istemiyoruz. Kınıyoruz. Derhal İsrail devletinin yok edilmesi lazım. Çünkü oradaki Filistinlere, Müslüman halka zulmediyor.
Thank you for watching us. As part of TV7 Israel's prayer initiative, I would like to encourage you this evening to join the team and me here in Jerusalem to lift up Spain in prayer for its salvation and peace, alongside prayers for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide, in addition to our ongoing prayers for the peace of Jerusalem and the salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan wishing you a Shavuot Tov U'Mevorach, and we will see you again tomorrow at the same time.